Well,
Yeah,
it's
it's
better.
not the best. Yeah.
Well, it's better than having the mic up there.
This is live broadcast as well.
Right, yeah.
Yeah,
I told
okay.
them to record it, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
so if I put this right here, because it comes out of there whenever someone speaks then.
Yep.
Perfect.
Okay.
That works. Thank you.
We'll get started in about 2 minutes here. 2 minutes. A special meeting of the Grand Forks School Board to order. First item on the agenda is call to order and pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 2 on the agenda, personnel complaint about Dr. Brenner. I will turn it over to Ms. Amber Flynn for a walkthrough of her report and findings with recommendations.
Thank you, Josh. Board members, I've supplied you with a memo, which I'll read and go over. I also have supplied you with a copy of my investigative report. I'll not read the investigative report in its entirety, but I will highlight portions of the document as well as my process. On May 15th, 2024, a personnel complaint was delivered to me under Policy KACB and Policy DE by Ms. Catherine Galach, Associate Superintendent of Secondary Education. The report generally alleges that Dr. Brenner attempted to coerce or manipulate Ms. Galach into resigning her position as Associate Superintendent, and further that he told her if she did not resign, he would seek dismissal for cause. Ms. Galach also asserts that Dr. Brenner has indefinitely suspended a proposed letter of reprimand to her. Ms. Galach asserts that Dr. Brenner made false and unfair allegations that threatened her professional credibility and career. Ms. Galach alleges that there has been a pattern of behavior by Dr. Brenner against her, resulting in a hostile work environment. On May 15th, I retained legal counsel of Howard Swanson of Swanson and Warcup. Howard has joined us today in the audience. On May 16th, I delivered the complaint to the respondent and acknowledged receipt of the complaint to the complainant. During this time, because there was an active investigation going on, I let the complainant know of a proposed timeline that I wouldn't begin investigating the complaint until after the investigation was completed that was submitted by GFPS, and of an upcoming surgery procedure in which I would be out for 2 weeks. On June 6th, we held a first meeting with the complainant to start the investigative interviews. Between June 6th and July 24th, additional interviews were held, as well as additional documents were requested and reviewed. During this time, additionally, we had a reorganization meeting on July 8th. At that meeting, Dave Berger was elected as president of the school board. Because I was no longer the active president, I worked with general counsel to discuss how we would move forward with this current complaint. Dave and I had a conversation, and it was decided that I would continue moving forward with the investigative process as the previous president, with support from Dave, and he asked that I deliver this report and sign off on it. July 24th through 29th, we had meetings with the respondent and complainant to go over the report. I made some edits to the report during this time and requested a availability poll for a special meeting. Throughout the investigation, I reviewed numerous internal documents. Those have been provided as outlined in the investigative report. That is on page 2. Included on page 3 are individuals that I interviewed. And then it continues with factual findings from the investigation. If board members could turn to page 8, I will go over the conclusions and recommendation sections. Based upon the foregoing findings of fact, I made the following conclusions. I reviewed relevant policy and law, specifically policy DE, policy CAAABR, policy ACEA, policy AAC, policy ACF, North Dakota Century Code sections that applied as well. On page 10 of my investigative report, I'll turn your attention to item 8. The Grand Forks Public School District does not have a policy which defines a hostile work environment. I'm pointing this specific piece out because it was referenced in the complaint. And because our school district does not have a policy which defines this, there are some references to definitions I used in fact-finding and coming to my conclusion. Additionally, if you turn to page 11, there's an application of facts to the policy and law. I'll go over those as well as my recommendations. The complainant's allegations regarding meetings with Dr. Brenner, in which Dr. Brenner requested her resignation, established a deadline to respond to his request for resignation, statements about issuing a letter of reprimand, statements regarding avoidance of front page news, statement regarding potential non-renewal or discharge with cause are uncontested by Dr. Brenner and did occur. The actions of Dr. Brenner are within his statutory authority as outlined in his job description and the North Dakota Century Code, and granted under policies adopted by the Grand Forks Public School District. The actions of Dr. Brenner were not based upon any protected classifications, including age, race, gender, sexual orientation, color, religion, sex, national origin, the presence of any mental or physical disability, or participation in lawful activities of the employer's premise during non-working hours. There are no instances of disrespectful or dishonest conduct on the part of Dr. Brenner in any of the meetings referenced in the complaint. There is no evidence to conclude that any retaliation against the complainant has occurred either prior to or following the filing of her complaint. There are no facts establishing a causal nexus between any alleged harassment and the complainant's protected group status. There's no evidence to conclude that any violation of the school's whistleblower policy has occurred. There has been no change in the complainant's term, condition, or privilege of employment. The conduct attributable to Dr. Brenner, as alleged in the complainant's complaint, is not so extreme, severe, or pervasive enough to create an objectively hostile or abusive work environment. Any alleged actions or violations attributable to Dr. Brenner did not substantially disrupt the orderly operation of the school district. However, there's still some evidence to suggest an atmosphere of tension, non-collaboration, distrust, and non-congeniality that has the potential to affect the provision of education services within the district. Dr. Brenner is currently subject to recommendations made by the Grand Forks Public School District Board on the 20th day of May 2024. Pursuant to policy KACB, I am to make recommendations regarding my investigation to the board for final action. No confirmed conduct violated any relevant policy or law. As a result of the above findings and facts of conclusions, I make the following recommendation. No disciplinary action is warranted against Dr. Brenner. The district reaffirms the recommendations outlined in the investigative report dated May 20th, 2024, including the following. The superintendent shall have a 360-degree evaluation, and the district shall hire a leadership coach chosen by the school board president and vice president to evaluate and provide feedback on Dr. Brenner's leadership style and assist in cultivating, building, and rebuilding good relationships within administrators in the district. One item of difference that you'll note on the memo and my investigative report is when I wrote the investigative report, I had only put president, but the agreed upon recommendation from the board was to include the president and vice president in the selection of that coach. Additionally, a written instruction to all parties shall be issued stating that absolutely no retaliation by any district employee, including the complainant and respondent, with regard to any employee, investigator, or legal counsel, participation, recommendation, statements made in the investigation of this complaint shall occur. At this time, I'll welcome discussion or any questions. There should be no discussion from the complainant or respondent and only discussion from the school board.
Are there questions or items for discussion from school board members. Eric? Or
What
Jake?
is the status of the leadership coach selection?
Dave and I have begun meetings with individuals. We have a follow-up later this week, and we're hoping to have someone identified in the next week or couple weeks.
Eric?
I wonder if you could help explain just a couple of things under the investigative report. Under factual findings, it's number 47. It's on page 8. I'm wondering where that came from. Was that in the complainant's letter, or where did that come from? Page 8, number 40. It was number 47. Do you see it?
Might be page 9 on the PDF.
I got it.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, yeah. It's right above conclusions. And I'll tell you, I guess I'll explain it so that you know. I mean, anybody that's been in leadership of a big organization, there is going to always be some dysfunction. There's always going to be some conflicts. In fact, sometimes conflicts are good because you get better ideas out of that. And there's always going to be some trust issues among some. I'm trying to understand that about what this 47 actually means.
Without naming specific individuals or conversations, my conclusion was that there are some areas of improvement that our district can make. That includes with the superintendent and administration within the district, cabinet level principals. So the sentence reads as is, but I don't think it would be appropriate to share specific information.
Well, that's okay. I'm just, again, I point out that when you're running a big organization, you're going to have some of those issues normally, and I'm not sure those issues were caused by this complaint or not. The other question I had was on page 12, number 22, under application of facts. And you had just read it a little while ago. You talked about, however, there's evidence to suggest an atmosphere of tension, non-collaboration, distrust. Again, was that in some of was that part of the complainant's letter, or was that from your individual interviews with people?
Based on the start of the investigation, which starts with the complaint letter, those are my findings based on the interviews that I had.
Okay. Again, I think that's kind of squishy in big organizations. Okay.
Further questions, items for discussion? Jeff?
I think along with the leadership coach, wasn't there something about meeting with the principals?
Yes, I didn't include it in this memo specifically because it was a different complaint.
Yep.
So,
Is there a way that we can have all administration maybe attend those meetings and work on relationships with all administration, not just the superintendent with the principals?
I think that's probably going to be the work of the current president and vice president leadership team of the board to go through with Dr. Brenner.
Okay. And then when all this occurs, along with the coach and these meetings, can we get a report out on those on regular school board meetings?
I think that would be very fair. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other items? Eric?
Well, I'm certainly in agreement with recommendations 1 and 3. I don't agree with recommendation 2. Number 1, you found no disciplinary action is warranted. I don't know why we would regurgitate number 2, which was a totally separate issue that had nothing to do with this. So I don't think recommendation number 2 should be in this report. I agree with 1 and 3. I don't agree with 2.
I'll make a comment on that. I included those two because in this instance, the individual, the complainant is a direct report to the superintendent. And so because there were that was already a recommendation affirmed in a previous investigation, and this person is a direct report of the respondent. I included that one, as well as I thought it would additionally be beneficial to apply the same leadership coach and cultivating better relationships with additional members of the cabinet, and that it applied in this situation as well.
And I would generally kind of reiterate that, Amber. I mean, this recommendation starts to resolve probably some root underlying questions. So I think it is appropriate as an action on this particular complaint. Whether it's a recommendation unique to this or not, I think that the meaning's the same. That leadership training and all that's going to help this relationship, or at least I'm optimistic that it will, because we're dealing with two very fine people who I trust are going to find coexistence here.
Further questions or comments?
I do have a question on this letter of reprimand. It kind of sounded like my own reading of it. It sounded like a draft that was discussed between two colleagues, and then now it's sitting in some limbo. And I think resolution of that limbo would be very worthwhile, whether it's an outright statement that, no, this is not a draft, nothing's going forward, or in fact it does go forward. I think cleaning up that limbo would be very helpful, because as a fellow employee, I wouldn't want that kind of hanging out there over my psyche, if you will. So resolution on that issue, I think, would be very important.
Other comments, questions regarding the report and/or recommendations?
I agree
Jeff.
with Jay. Can we get maybe a date to have that resolved by or not resolved by? Or, I mean, leaving it hanging out there is a horrible thing.
Eric?
I think we're getting well beyond what our role is in this position right here. I mean, I think your comments may be appropriate, may not, but I don't think we as a board can weigh in on those kind of internal matters myself.
I did not take any action or recommendations on that specific item because that specific piece, at the end of the day, Dr. Brenner has the authority to supervise an employee underneath him. And so I didn't feel like that was a recommendation that I could make at this time. I would maybe reference that question to Howard if there's a further question about that, but I didn't include that in my recommendation because it just, I mean, if that is something that's deemed necessary, there's nothing in the personnel file as of now. So that hasn't been filed, it hasn't been placed in there. And the statutory duty of the superintendent and outlined in policy is to supervise those employees. So I didn't feel that I had the authority to put that on here.
Further comments? Any other questions in the room, board members?
I will just say that, I think these past couple of months have been quite difficult. I've learned a lot. I think as a board, I don't think anyone would argue that we made the right decision by moving the policy in the direction of hiring a third-party neutral investigator or delegating that, simply with the time commitment, the level of, or the nature of the complaints. I think that our employees in the Grand Forks Public School District are exceptional people, and I'm excited for the school year to start, but it feels a little bit tainted on the heels of some tough conversations, and so I really hope that our focus is to keep the students in mind and repair and rebuild relationships from all parties involved to make sure that we are providing the best educational experience for our students.
Okay. If there are no further questions or comments regarding, we do need to approve of the recommendations. So I would seek a motion for that approval or for a change.
I'll make that motion.
Joel has motioned that we approve of the recommendations made in the report from Amber to the board. Is there a second? Bill has seconded. We'll take a roll call vote. Oop, Eric has a comment.
I will be voting no on this for a few reasons. Number one, there's a couple of areas that I disagree with on factual findings. You've got no disciplinary action is recommended against Dr. Brenner yet. We put in that number 2, and I don't think number 2 should be in there. That was a totally different report. And so I agree with everything else, but I will vote no just because I feel strongly about number 2. So I just want it to be noted why I'm voting no.
Okay. With that, we'll take a roll call vote.
Lund?
No.
Flynn?
Yes.
Palmasino?
No.
Larson?
Yes.
Clevin?
No.
Berger is absent. Manley?
Yes.
Anderson?
No.
3 yes, 4 no, 1 absent.
Motion fails. Dr. Lund?
I would move we approve the recommendations of number 1 and number 3, and not number 2.
We have a new motion on the floor for approval of recommendations. Sorry about that. We have a new motion on the floor for approval of recommendations number 1 and number 3 as written. Is there a second for that? Bill will second that. Eric?
And I just want to point out, the number 2 recommendations are already in place. It's not like we're eliminated, they're already in place.
Take a roll call vote.
Oh, Josh, there's
Oh,
more.
Jay,
There's more.
sorry.
Leave the floor open for discussion.
Sorry, yep, Jay.
And I agree with Dr. Lund there, but I would not strike it. I would offer an amendment if the motion maker would be so willing. Rather than delete item 2B or item 2, move it up to somewhere else in the report, because I do think it's factually important and should be included in the report, but would agree with the motion maker that it not be part of the recommendation.
There is reference to it right above the recommendations that it, number 23 says Dr. Brenner is currently subject to recommendations made by the Grand Forks Public School District Board on the 20th day of May. It doesn't specifically state what those are, but it makes reference to that.
Sure, but I think explicit language describing that would be useful, because also remember, it's probably not all of us seeing this, right? I mean, at some point, it's a public record, public document, and I think having that factual statement would be useful to other readers. But again, we have a motion, a second, we would need an amendment to the motion if so approved by the motion maker.
Well, you have to get a second, and then we will vote on that before we vote on the original motion.
Well, I will move to take item 2 out of the recommendations and as additional language to item 23, immediately preceding the recommendations.
I'll second.
So there's a separate motion then on the floor to take the language in item 2 from Jay, seconded by Amber, to take the language from item number 2 and move it to the final page of the report included in number 23. There's a motion and a second for that. Joel?
Just for clarification, we don't want it to say shall have a 360 and shall hire a coach. I think those are, it's just to indicate that this has already happened, just for the author or whomever is going to do the work. I think that's what we're trying to do.
I think it would still be outlined as such because, like, we're directing that to happen. So that process shall occur, essentially. That's what it reads, I guess.
Eric?
To completely wordsmith this to death. On number 2, it says the district reaffirms. Shouldn't it say the board? It's not it's the board, right? I'm just if in case in case this amendment passes, it should say the board, not the district, right? Yeah.
Agreed. Would you accept that to your motion?
Yes, I would. It's consistent with the intent.
Okay. Amber? Okay. Any further comments on that, on the motion on the floor then? Okay. So we'll vote first on Jay's motion of moving the item number 2 from out of the recommendations to put under number 23 on the final page just above recommendations. We will take a roll call vote.
And may I ask clarification on that?
Yep.
Is the amendment about changing the word from the district reaffirms to the board reaffirms part of Mr. Cleven's amendment?
Yes,
Yes.
that's included.
Yes.
Thank you. Larson?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Cleven?
Yes.
Berger is absent. Flynn?
Yes.
Palmasino?
No.
Lund?
No.
Anderson?
No.
4 yes, 3 no, 1 absent.
Motion passes. So then do we have one more motion to take up? Can we restate what the motion was on that?
Well, it's a goofy motion because it says to eliminate number 2, which has now just been passed, to move up to 23.
Yeah. So at this point, would there be, would you
Any
like to
discussion?
discussion on that motion? Or?
We
No.
just take a vote.
So
Okay,
it's
one second.
original motion as amended.
Original motion as amended?
Palmasino?
No.
Berger is absent. Lund?
No.
Flynn?
Yes.
Larson?
Yes.
Manley?
Yes.
Cleven?
Yes.
Anderson?
No.
4 yes, 3 no, 1 absent.
So that motion passes.
Yes.
Any further items? Amber?
No.
Eric?
I just want to thank Amber. This has not been a enviable job. It's not, you don't think of it as when you're the president, and she's had to do it twice now, so it's very difficult, and I can hardly imagine what she's gone through, so thank you.
Thank you. Anything further? We are adjourned.